Good afternoon. We should probably get started. My name is Jessica Duncan, and I'm hoping you've enjoyed your sessions. Our session 3 presentation on our Insight to Impact session features Robert McDougall, Vermont Deputy Attorney General for the state of Vermont. Rob was appointed Deputy Attorney General by Vermont Attorney General Charity Clark in January 2023. He served in the Attorney General's office for more than 20 years, contributing his expertise across 4 divisions: Human Services, General Counsel, Administrative Law, Environmental Protection, and Public and Consumer Protection. So pretty long list. A seasoned litigator, Rob has practiced at every level of Vermont's courts before stepping into his current leadership role. He served for 6 years as the Chief of Environmental Protection Division, guiding the state's efforts under 3 previous Attorney Generals. Rob's educational journey reflects the very spirit of this conference, how learning fuels service and shapes purpose. He holds both a Juris Doctorate and a Master of Studies in Environmental Law from Vermont Law School, and is a proud 1999 graduate of Lyndon State College. Through his career, Rob has shown how strong educational foundation and a commitment to justice can make a meaningful difference in the lives of Vermonters and the health of our communities. We are very honored and proud to be able to feature Rob McDougall as a speaker for the Making a Difference and Making a Living conference. And I will turn it over to Rob.
Thanks so much for having me here today. I am very happy to be here. I am a very proud alumni of what was then the state college system, and now is the state university system. But I'm really glad to be here. I'm going to try to not talk from my notes, but I have notes just so I don't lose track of where I am on time and stuff like that. How many of you are students here today? I'm assuming. So most of my stuff here is for students. I feel really old saying this, but it was 26 years ago that I was a student at the state. When I think back on those days, I think back on how excited I was about school, how excited I was to meet my classmates. Thankful to have had wonderful professors up there at Lyndon. I was thinking back, and 3 of them that jumped out to me were Alan Boy, Buck Lyles, and Jim Doyle. They all taught me a lot when I was there. But I also really remember the nervousness I had as a student about what comes next. Like, what is my future going to hold? What's my place in the world going to be after graduation? So I grew up in Vermont. I grew up in Quechee, just across Route 4 over the mountain. After I graduated from Lyndon State, I went to Vermont Law School. And my first job out of law school was working at the Attorney General's office. I took a job as a law clerk in the Corrections Legal Division. I am sure that people go to law school to be corrections lawyers. I did not, but it was a foot in the door. It was also the lowest job that we had in our office. You didn't have to be a lawyer to have that job. It was really an opportunity to get a job when it's a very tough job market, as I'm sure it is right now for all of you as you start to think about what's next. I was making $22,000 a year. You didn't have to be a lawyer, like I said, to have that job. But I had a foot in the door. I worked hard, and I worked my way up the chain in the AG's office. Since then, I served as a special assistant attorney general, as an assistant attorney general, as a division chief, and now I'm the deputy attorney general, which is really the number 2 job in our office behind the elected Attorney General, Charity Clark. So I kind of, in like a private law firm, I'd be a managing partner. I oversee all of the work that comes through the office, new cases that we bring, cases we're defending, settlements, that sort of thing, all flow up through me to advise the Attorney General as to what we should do. And then I take her thoughts back down to the team. In the very humbling introduction I just got, it kind of went over a lot of my career. But I've done a whole bunch of different things in the office, and I think that that's really made me a better person to have the job I have right now. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk a little bit about today. I've worked in human services, I've worked in environmental protection, I've worked in consumer protection. I've prosecuted doctors before the Board of Medical Practice. I did appellate work for the Department of Children's and Families and family law. I've had 10 different offices in Montpelier in my 23 years working for the state. And I am so proud to have the job I have now. It's a real honor to be the Deputy Attorney General. It's not a job I would have thought I would ever have until I got it. But I feel like it makes sense that I have it given the career I've had. I come to work every day in a leadership role to get to work with some of the greatest and brightest legal minds that we have in Vermont, all of whom have chosen to make public service their career. They've decided that they want to help protect Vermonters and solve problems. So it's a real pleasure to come to work. We do very important work. It's an honor to have the job I have. And I don't know if I'd be in this role if I didn't have the windy road that I've had to get there. And I think that windy road started at Lyndon. So I get to meet with interns in our office a lot. And I always talk about that. I talk about the windy road I've had. As a manager in our office, which I've been for almost 10 years, I've definitely seen people come to our office that had more of a straight line, right? They went to college, they went to law school, maybe they were a judicial clerk, and then they got the job they wanted. And that's great for them. But I know way more people that have had the windy road path to where they ended up. And I think that's something I've had, and I'm proud of it. And I think it's something that is totally okay to have. And I think that some people, especially students, get very nervous about where am I going to be? Is this the right move? Is that the right move? What if I don't like it? And that's all okay. I think that that's that windy road that can really give you great experience. I spoke to the incoming class at Vermont Law School in the summer when they had their orientation week and they stopped at the State House. And I was talking about my windy road career, and there was a state senator there who said, windy roads are the most scenic ones. And I think that's really true. And I think that I've benefited from that. It's made me a better lawyer. It's made me a better manager. And it's made me a better person, I think. I think that careers that take you to places and opportunities you would not have predicted when you were in college can be just the best careers to have. I think that with that backdrop, I thought I'd give a few pieces of advice and maybe a little more about my career along the way that might be helpful to you all as students thinking about your future careers. So first thing is when I meet with interns, I always tell them, the interns I meet with are typically law students. We have a few college interns, but they're mostly law students. And even when I spoke to the incoming law school class a couple of months back, I always tell them to keep and remember the excitement that you felt when you started college. I try to remember why you went to Vermont State, what brought you to it. Reflect on that over your 4 years of college. College, like work, can be tough. There's good days and bad days, and I think it's really good on the bad days to think back on what motivated you to come to college in the first place. Remember your first day as a freshman student. What you came here to better yourself. You came here to get an education. You came here to contribute to your community. And it's really good to look back on that and remember, this is why I do this. And that can be even when you're working down the road someday. You can go back and say, why did I go to school? Why did I want to do this? And it's a nice way to kind of pick yourself up and remember your core values and your motivating reasons for going to school. I tell law students to write those things down, like put them down in a book someplace or a note on your phone that you can go back to on those tough days. The next piece of advice I offer is maybe the most important one, and that's to be open to different paths. I think it's so easy as a student and even as a working person in a career to put yourself in a box and say, this is what I am. And some people know what they are and more power to them, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't know, what you want to be when you grow up until you grow up. And even then that can change. I really believe that any opportunity is a good one. When I graduated high school, I didn't start at Lyndon State College. I went to a much bigger school as an English major. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I liked reading and writing. And I started to kind of blow around in the breeze. I had a good time. I made a lot of good friends, but I wasn't clicking with the academics at all. And someplace in my second year there, I thought I might want to be a writer. I want to be a journalist. And I talked to an editor at a local paper. And that editor said, you gotta get some stuff published if you want to be a journalist. And so I started writing for the school paper, and then I transferred to Lyndon State College, which it was known as at the time, because they had a journalism program. And so I transferred to Lyndon. I wanted to be a journalist. I was a journalism and English major, English literature when I was there. I had great teachers, like I mentioned earlier, and I started doing internships. In the summers, I wrote for a very small paper in Claremont, New Hampshire, the Claremont Eagle Times. And in the school year, I wrote for the Burlington Free Press. And so my senior year came around, and I had a couple hundred stories published under my name, my byline, as they would say in the newspaper world. But I started to feel like the newspaper business wasn't a long-term one for me. I was worried about the shift to, back then it was more physical and less digital, and it's moving to digital. And I felt like that to be a full-time journalist for my whole career might not be the right place for me. I'm kind of surprised. It was actually just last summer that the paper in Claremont shut down. I thought it would come sooner than that, but I was really sorry to see that it closed its operations. So I talked to my professors at Lyndon. I had a brother who was a year ahead of me in law school, and he was at Vermont Law School. And I was watching what he was doing, and I was watching obviously a huge reading and writing component of law school. And I saw what he was doing and realized that like taking legal writing is very similar to journalism, right? You take something complex and you make it digestible for a general audience. So when you write a legal brief, you're writing to a judge that's a generalist judge, knows a lot about a lot. But you have to take your complex thing and make it understandable for your argument to win. And that's kind of what journalism was. So I thought there was a good overlap there. And my professors at Lyndon encouraged me to apply. And so I applied to Vermont Law School and got accepted. So again, that's not something I anticipated really up until I did it. And then when I went to law school, I started in the fall of 1999 at Vermont Law School, and I studied environmental law. But that was they're known for that. They're always in the top handful of schools. Back then it was always one or two. Now it's more like 5 or 6, but it's not a reflection on that program. It's more a reflection on more schools have environmental law programs, and so they've dropped down a little bit. But the whole time I was at law school, I thought I would be an administrative lawyer. I thought I'd be never entering a courtroom. I thought I'd be doing zoning, permit appeals, that sort of thing, land use stuff, sitting in rooms like this at tables, not even standing up in court, that kind of thing. And that was kind of what I geared my education around there. But it wasn't until I started working at the Department of Corrections legal unit, where I first started as a law clerk and then a couple of years later became an assistant attorney general. That's one of the busiest parts of our office. They get sued every single day, and it's all important. And so I started doing that work. It was still a lot of legal writing, which I was pretty good at. But I had to teach myself how to get comfortable standing up in court, making an argument, talking to a judge, questioning witnesses, engaging with opposing counsel. And I found out I was pretty good at that. And I would not have known that until I did it. After corrections, I moved into another role that was not in court, and I really missed it. And so I tried to find a way to get back into litigation, still keeping my eye on environmental law, because that's what I wanted to do. It took me a little while to get there, but I did. And later in my time in the Attorney General's office, they've asked me to move around. So I've done, like I said, environmental law, I've done corrections, I've done family law, I've done board of medical practice stuff, I've done Supreme Court work, federal court, criminal court, and I've always said yes when I had the chance to, because I always thought it was bettering me professionally and making me a better, well-rounded lawyer. There were times when I was asked to do things that I honestly didn't want to do. One time I was working as an environmental lawyer, which is what I went to school to do. I was very happy with that job. And they asked me to move into the role doing the medical practice board cases with doctors. And I didn't know anything about how to read a medical record, unprofessional conduct with doctors, that sort of thing. But I felt like I owed it to the office out of loyalty to, it was truly an ask, and I accepted it. And I did that for 2 years. And when that was done, I went back to environmental, and my boss was the same boss. And he said, you grew leaps and bounds in your 2 years. I don't know what happened. You came back as a more confident lawyer, a more well-rounded lawyer. And that's stuff I could not have anticipated. And I think there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Like when doctors get in trouble, they get the best lawyers in the state. And so I was all of a sudden going up against these heavy hitter lawyers that I would not have gone up against otherwise. I was building a reputation with those lawyers. I was, presenting myself, as the lawyer for the state, but a straight shooter and an honest person. And we did a lot of good work negotiating cases when I was there. So when I took that, I didn't think I'd be saying that. I thought I was kind of doing the office a favor, and then I'd get back to what I wanted to do 2 years later, but it was much better than I had expected. And then, I became a manager, and I was the environmental chief for 6 years. And then when Charity Clark won her election in 2022, she was the AG-elect building her team before she took office in January, and she reached out to me and asked me if I would consider being the deputy. And would never have thought I'd have that role. But when she talked to me about it, it made a lot of sense. I had worked in human services, which is located in Waterbury. I had worked in consumer protection, environmental protection. I had done criminal cases. I had done civil cases. I had done administrative law cases. I had done Supreme Court work. In my 20 years of winding through the office, I had done a little bit of everything in a way that made me a good fit for this job that oversees all that work now. I could relate to the people in Waterbury who always have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder that they're in Waterbury and not Montpelier, and they're always forgotten. And I said, hey, I know, I was there too. I worked there 5 years. I could relate to the criminal attorneys and their how some of those cases really stick with you. You take that work home at night. I could talk to the people about the appellate work of the family law stuff that can be so heart-wrenching as well. And so my windy road career path, which some people would say that's not what you want the straight line, it became my biggest strength. And so that's where I really think, if I put myself in a box and said, I'm this and this only, I wouldn't be where I am right now. I know that for sure. And I don't think I'd be as good a lawyer or manager as I am. Now, if you have something you really want to do or be, I think that's good too. And my advice there is to keep your eye on that goal as you take a windy road, because I think you can still get there with hard work and motivation, but you might find something on the way that you like better. And so that's where I think you don't define yourself by what you want to be, but you can still get there if you work hard. Another piece of advice I offer people is I really think you can do anything for a year and probably two. I think that in college and law school, 4 years feels like forever, right? And in law school, 3 years. But when you're in the real world, time flies. Like I have had times when I've done jobs that they told me you have to do this for 2 years. And I started it and it was over before I knew it. And I just think that, time can really fly. And I've had jobs I haven't liked that have flown by. I think you can really, you'll be surprised how quick time goes. I've talked to many students who have told me, after law school, I can be a clerk for this judge. It's a great opportunity, but my family's in New York and the clerkship is in Michigan, and I don't want to do that. And I said, well, how long is the clerkship? And they say a year. I said, you can do a year. You can do a year in Michigan. Like, go do it because it's going to be so great for you. You're going to learn so much, and it's a great opportunity. I also think there's value in doing stuff you don't like. Like I've had jobs, like I said, that I really didn't like. I liked the people I worked with. I didn't like the work. I didn't like going to work. I couldn't wait to go home. I didn't want to go back the next day. But I knew, I don't have to do this forever. I can move on. Time will go quick. And now I know this is not for me, which can be just as valuable as knowing what you want to do. Like I said, I think a year and even two people can do. I think that people are too quick to say, I can't do that just because of time, even though it's a great opportunity. My next point, when you're in your studies and when you're working in your careers down the road, I really believe that if you work hard and you treat people with kindness, doors will open and opportunities will present themselves. And it has to be both. I don't think you could be the hardest worker going, but if you're a jerk, you're not going to get anywhere. And if you're a jerk and the hardest worker, you're not going to get anywhere. I really think you have to do both. Treat people kindly and work hard. It doesn't mean You don't have to have strong feelings on your work or stand up for yourself. And in law, we talk about zealous advocacy, right? When you go to court, you have to zealously advocate for your client. And I've had cases with lawyers who have been really tough in court and really aggressively, zealously advocating for their client. And then we can go get coffee afterwards, right? I mean, Vermont is too small a place to be a jerk. You can't get away with it. And I really think you can be a professional, be tough and good at your job, still be kind and still work hard. I think you're so lucky to be at Vermont State. It's a whole community. We're seeing a lot of it today of people that are kind, people who have worked hard. And so I would encourage you all as students to, and members of the community to meet others' kindness with your own and work hard. And I think you'll be successful wherever you end up. And then my last point of advice is to enjoy Vermont. You're so lucky to be going to school in Vermont. I really think it's important to make time to enjoy Vermont. I think, and I say make time because you have to put that in your schedule. I think you can't just rely on ebbs and flows of college because there's so much to do and there's so little time. I think that we're lucky we have 4 seasons here, right? People don't have that everywhere. Vermont's a great place. You can get pretty much anywhere in an hour or two. You can go to Montpelier to see the State House. You can go to Burlington to see a show. You can go down to Brattleboro or White River Junction. The Northeast Kingdom, you know, it's a great place where I went to college, and it's beautiful in the fall. We're a little past the most beautiful part, but it's still nice up there. Get outdoors, go hiking, biking, skiing, sit by a lake, sit by a river. The key really is to make time. You're in this wonderful place while you're in school. Make the time to do it. Plan the time to do it. Work-life balance is so hard when you're a professional. And school life balance can be so hard when you're a student. So really make time for that. And then once you get around and get to know Vermont, maybe stay here. You get out of school, stay here and work. Vermont's a great place to be a professional. I know probably some of you grew up here, but some of you didn't. And I think it's hopefully it's a place you really like while you're here and you decide to stay here after college. So I'll thank you all for going to school in Vermont. I'll thank you all for being Vermont State University students. I wish you all good luck with your classes, and I'm happy to take questions. I'll also say, if any of you ever think about being a lawyer, I'm always happy to talk to students, and I would be more than happy to talk to any Vermont State University student about the pros and cons of being a lawyer, not just like do it. I'll tell you all the good and bad and stuff that goes with it, because there are, like I said, good days and bad days, but I'm happy to take questions on that, about anything I've said or about my work or the office or working in Vermont. So
I'm not sure that you noticed, but these kiddos that with me, they're we're Fairhaven High School.
okay, well, you better.
So we get some
Yeah.
BTSers over here.
Yeah. So I didn't know if you knew that they
No,
were actually, so there's 2 seniors and the rest are juniors. So
That's well, even more power to you guys for coming to an event like this.
Yeah.
You guys twins?
Yeah.
That's great. Fairhaven used to be my biggest rival. One Hartford High.
Oh, we're playing them in the this
yeah,
Friday,
yeah. So that was
right? It's in Hartford
Yeah,
football.
yeah.
Those were our big games.
Whoever wins that goes to this. I was gonna say Super Bowl.
But it's great, and you know, so you all know Vermont, and it's great to be here in Vermont, and it's great to stay in Vermont. If you can, or come back. So
No, I like what you said about Vermont being too small to be a jerk, because it really has gotten me every professional career I've had by networking. Actually, like look around this room and think about how I'm related to the people in this room. Not actually related, it's not that. So, how I know people, you know, like Jackie was my high school softball coach.
High school, no, 7th and 8th grade girl.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
second
you're
grade.
old.
There's some other people I know that are parents in this room, so
Right.
some people that I
Right.
just found connections that like worked with my family, and you know that used to work with me, and even your connection to your brother who works at Vermont State University.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to ask, not that this relates to networking, but like, what would young Rob in high school or college say to Rob now about where you're at in your professional career? Would he be surprised? Would he be like,
yeah,
I
no, I don't. I think I would be very surprised, and I think Rob 5 years ago would be surprised. So it's really an honor to have the job I have. There's only 50 people in the country that have a job I have, right? Every state has one deputy, and so it's a real honor. It's also, I don't get my hands as dirty with the work anymore. I miss that a little bit. Like I used to have a caseload that I really liked doing. And when I was the environmental division chief, I had a team that I saw every day of like 10 people that I got to know really well, and especially through the pandemic when we were all kind of leaning on each other even more. But I don't think I would have ever thought I'd be overseeing, and some of that's because I would have put myself in a box, like I was talking about. Like I wasn't top of my class in law school, I was kind of middle of the class. Like I said, I don't know that corrections job was the most glorious job to come out to. And so I think that it's very easy to say like, oh no, I could never do that. And that's where I think I would have surprised myself because I'm doing what I'm doing. I'll just go back a little bit more on the point about being a jerk in Vermont. Like I think it's true of lawyers, but any profession. Vermont, the lawyers were in a bar, right? The Vermont Bar Association is all the lawyers in the state. And it's a very small bar compared to other states. And if I went around my office and said, name the 5 biggest jerk lawyers, they'd be a lot of overlap. Like once you get branded as something, it's really hard to shake that because we're so small. And when I was in the corrections division, we had cases, most of our cases were against the Prisoners' Rights Office. So there's an office of state government that defends, that brings cases for inmates, not to get money or not to say they didn't do the crime kind of thing, but more about the conditions of confinement in prison. So I need to get this medication, or I need to get into this class, or I need to get the time I earned by, my job in the prison. And probably 90% of my cases were against the same 3 attorneys. One of those attorneys had been there 30 years, and he was a tough lawyer in court. Like he was really hard to go up against. But he was a great guy. And he would call me before we went to court and say, hey, I'm going to bang the table in court today.
What's going down?
Yeah, totally. And then the other times he'd call me and say, you're going to have to file a motion on this one. And that was his code to me for, this inmate I'm representing thinks he has a case. He doesn't really have a case. You're going to have to file a motion to dismiss, and then the court will dismiss it. And so he was still advocating for his client because he was going to take it to his client and say, look, the state's right here. But it was, I learned a lot from him right away in my career that you don't get very far being a jerk. Vermont's so small that the guy you're having a case against one day might be your co-counsel the next. And you're all going to have to work together at some point. So I was so happy to have that experience with that really good lawyer across from me, not a colleague, but an opponent that taught me so much about that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Dan had a question. I will say we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
So I just wanted to ask about networking.
Yeah.
I'm the ADP for athletics for ESU, and I know in college sports, especially when we get higher up, it's not so much what you know, but who you know.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, when you were younger, moving up with your different positions, how much was that networking, getting to know people so that you would be hired at the next level?
Yeah, so it's a really good point. And a lot of that was the idea that I welcomed opportunity, right? So it was, I didn't even know I was networking at the time, right? But like if I was a low-level attorney in the corrections legal division and the civil division is the part of our office that defends the state from lawsuits. Like on the simplest level, it's like if you fall in a state parking lot, you sue the state, civil division defends you, but also there's really important high-level stuff, constitutional challenges and that sort of thing. And so there was a time when they came and said, we need someone to be the worker bee on this case. We need a low-level junior attorney to help the senior attorney process paperwork, get everything, the files in order. And I said yes to that kind of stuff. When I moved into the Board of Medical Practice work, once I got my head around that work, I knew I could take work on the side. It would have been easy for me to go home and just do my job, but I wanted to keep growing. And so I did these cases for the Department of Children and Families. I did 10 Supreme Court appeals when I wasn't working for that part of the office. And so I got my name out there by helping. And I think that was my version of networking in my office, so that when people say, hey, we got this tough case, we have to put together a team. Who do we want on our team? They say, oh, let's get Rob on there because he's really helpful and he's, he knows what he's doing. And they knew that because I'd helped them in other stuff. And so that kind of idea that any opportunity is a good one was my version of networking from really the lowest job in my office to the number 2 job over 23 years of people getting to know me. Like, and it's like, it's fun for me now because like when I was, not in management, I didn't really know the deputy. I know who the deputy was. but I didn't know the deputy. And I really feel like if I walk the hallways, I know the people in my office because I worked with them. And I was not just a manager that came in and told them how to do things. I had learned from them. I also know they're all smarter than me, most of them, right? And so I know that from working with them too. And I think it's, that's my version of networking. It's just by taking the opportunities to help when I could, got my name out there and it worked out great. So.
Thank you.
I also just networking too, I always tell people in my office, like interns we have, I'm absolutely true here. I am cold call people, reach out to alumni, reach out to people that even if you don't know them, Vermont is full of nice people who are more than willing to sit down, get a cup of coffee or a virtual cup of coffee, and people should take advantage of that.
Yeah, I did. I was interested in your comment about having been in environmental law and, you know, I would say similar to the state college system right now, Vermont is kind of discovering a bit of a new identity given, you know, we building a lot of housing. We're trying to have an influx of housing. But at the same time, we don't want to lose what Vermont is. Do you have any opinions on perhaps new policies that should be written in regarding our environmental law to make sure that we don't lose what we are defined as we try to bring more business, more construction, more people into the state?
I think that they work so much on that state house, right? They have so many, they're all trying to strike that balance between me and what Vermont is. And I think sometimes people say those environmentalists are holding us back, and that's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of good kind of green builders in Vermont, people that want to build, but build the right way to protect the environment, because it is what brings people here, what people love about being in Vermont. So I think it's not a can't do, it's more of a can do, but do it the right way kind of thing. And I think that's where Vermont has grown a lot, because I think the builders we have in Vermont are really thoughtful about the environment and they want to do things the right way. And so I think that everyone's working together to better the system. We also have a governor who's a contractor, right? And he knows a lot about that. And I think he's trying to help keep us on the right path of growing, but not losing what makes Vermont Vermont. And it's not just builders, there's so much, that's a huge answer. There's so much we talk about, right? Farms and everything are changing, and it's hard to look back, but I do think everyone's pulling in the right direction and working together, and it's hard because that's not always the case in Vermont, that we're all working the right way. But I think that everyone's motivated to work on housing and do it the right way to protect Vermont, so.
Well, thank you. Did we have anything on the chat?
No.
I'm gonna come up and tell you, thank you so much for
Being at the Making Difference Making a Living Conference.
This is for your contribution to public higher education by supporting this conference and being a person who's making a difference. So thank you.
No, thank you.